Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Fairune Collection for the Nintendo Switch. And first off, full disclosure, there is a physical copy of this game out there, so if you are a collector, you might want to look for it. But as a note for this review in particular, because the Fairune Collection is a collection of the Fairune games, I'm going to pretty much be noting overall themes and then any discrepancies between them so that all of the games can be reviewed in this review, because again, I'm reviewing the collection. But as the locked-off shoot-'em-up style version of the game is obviously completely different from the other three that are available, please note that most of the things I'm going to say probably don't apply to the shoot-'em-up portion. But diving straight into the story for Fairune and its sequel, we're thrown into a story of a world in chaos. Possibly. Because as we're welcomed into this awesome fantasy world, we're told that we're the hero, but that these three fairies or three spirits have, for some reason, absconded into obscurity, and their absence is actually causing the world to go into just a bit of turmoil. And so with this brief and vaguely imperative storyline scenario, we're pretty much dumped into the world of Fairune to figure out what it is that we need to do and how exactly to do it. And if you are a fan of old school and retro adventure games, you'll probably really appreciate the absolute lack of hand-holding. But while any top-down pseudo-Zelda-like adventure game is going to have a lot of stuff that we can already assume about it just by the general conventions of the genre, one of the coolest features about Fairune and its sequel that actually took me a little while to figure out, or at least to figure out the value of, is the game's embedded combat system, because it not only balances combat and game progression, but also kind of scripts how you should progress through the game. If you are familiar with tabletop gaming, as possibly some of my fans might be, combat isn't really carried out through swinging of swords and defending of ranged attacks, as much as it is done through a simple level check system. If you're too far above an enemy level, they'll be squashed immediately and you won't lose any health, but you also won't gain any experience. If you and the enemy are roughly at the same level, you might lose more or less HP, but you'll also gain some experience. And if the enemies are too far above your own level, you'll probably just take some damage. And no matter how many times you charge into them, you're not gonna do them any harm. And while originally I kind of thought this was a cheap way of just avoiding a real combat system, I found out that it is absolutely integral not only to scripting gameplay, but it's a real advantage when you've already progressed a bit of the way through the game and have to find yourself backtracking through low-level areas, because you don't have to be worried about combat. You can just focus on your mission or whatever puzzle you're trying to solve, and because you're so OP, you just literally leave a bunch of dead enemies in your wake. Then yeah, the feeling was oddly satisfying. But as I've already alluded to the Fairune Collection being a bit more of a Zelda-like adventure game, and I've already hinted at liberal exploration and puzzles to be solved, one of the things that does break Fairune away from one of those expected genre conventions is the map itself. Now initially with the top-down view with the mini-map, it looks exactly like we would expect, but it's actually an infinite edge on every side of the map. Meaning that if you go too far to the left of the screen, you'll pop up on the right side, and if you go too far down, you'll pop up at the top. But just because you've found a key or managed to light a lantern doesn't mean you'll be able to just walk through the park and get to whatever new area you're trying to explore. Which essentially means navigating through the map in Fairune becomes one of the game's puzzles. And this navigation system is also carried through into the Fairune sequel. But going back to the game's combat system for a minute, because I did say that the combat system was intrinsically tied to your game progression. And one of the ways this happens, one of the ways that the combat itself scripts where you should be going in the game, is because that unlike a lot of other adventures and RPG games out there where enemies scale to your level, in Fairune they don't actually scale to your level, they scale to the game's progression. So the more you've managed to accomplish, the stronger the enemies will get. And because of the unique level check style combat system, it means you can never really be overpowered by enemies too much as long as you're in the correct portion of the game. But that doesn't mean you can exactly just breeze through, because every single enemy encounter, if you're at the appropriately leveled area of the game, will take HP. And as enemies do liberally respawn every time you leave and enter a game screen, you can expect that managing your hit points becomes a huge priority. Thankfully though, there are several areas within the game where you can actually refill your health, but you'll have to find them first. And so while you certainly can't power level, a little bit of grinding might go a long way. Looking at the Fairune Collection visually though, I'd have to say, honestly for me personally, the original Fairune release had an amazing GBA feel. And I'm really thankful they didn't blow the entire GBA screen out to the size of the Switch and sacrifice its quality. Instead, just overlaying static menus on the screen I think was a great choice to preserve its initial quality, but I can also see how that might get a little clustered up if you're playing in handheld mode. The Fairune sequel, though, as it is a bit higher resolution, does take advantage of the entire footprint of the large screen. And as you might expect, the Origins, or the prequel, is back to a NES or even prior to NES level pixel count. The audio soundtrack in the Fairune Collection, I'd have to say, is actually really impressive. It's really good quality chiptunes, it's poppy, and all of the soundtracks just seem to fit so perfectly with the type of game that this is. But that being said, while for me personally the Fairune Collection is a must-buy, especially if you can nab it while it's on sale on the eShop for like literally only a couple of dollars, there are a couple of things a gamer might want to be aware of before diving into the Fairune Collection. And the first one is that you're literally getting 4 video games for the price of 1, so I mean, honestly, that's a great deal. But one of the biggest critiques that I personally had is going from Fairune 1 to Fairune sequel, that issue of map navigation and the whole infinite edge of the map thing, where the map becomes its own puzzle. Because Fairune 2 is so much larger of a world, I found that navigating through it was a bit laborious. And that while the challenge of the game itself was really fun, navigating through the map itself became a little less fun. And that's possibly due to the death mechanic in the game, where there's really no penalty. You don't lose experience or money or anything like that. But you do start over pretty much right at the central point for the beginning of the game, and you have to navigate back through the entire map to wherever it was that you were trying to explore when you died. And as the map itself is a puzzle, that makes getting back to where you were sometimes quite puzzling. Other than that though, if you have played Fairune or Fairune 2 and you're ready to dive into another full version of a game for the origin story prequel, well, the prequel itself is actually really short, and I mean really short. Like, if you actually knew what you were doing and where all the little keys to the puzzles were, you could probably beat the game in under 10 minutes. It is a micro bite, but it's a good taste of where the game's story came from. And that being said, if you don't already know how to solve the puzzles, it's going to take you a fair bit longer than 10 minutes to play. And possibly the final note, because honestly the Fairune Collection doesn't really have that many things to critique. It's a good set of games. But the last critique is the fact that if you did want to play the shoot-'em-up version, well, you kinda can't until you devote a significant amount of your time to actually beat all 3 other versions of the game, making the Fairune shoot-'em-up a bit of a reward. And so if you don't feel like playing through 3 different RPGs just to play a shoot-'em-up, then you probably won't be doing it. But like I've said about a half dozen times already, this is a really good set of games. If you are a collector, you really should look for the physical. It came out about a year ago, so I mean, good luck with the scalpers. But other than that, it did hit a deep sale in the eShop, so if you don't care about collecting, get it now, if you're even remotely interested. But anyway, that does about wrap up the review of the Fairune Collection, now on the Nintendo Switch. So if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw us a like or comment to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. Because we do put out a couple of unique indie game reviews a week, and probably of games you've never even heard of. Because there are literally thousands of indie games out there, and new and unique ones are coming out every single day. And so whether it's an easy hard pass or an absolutely unforgettable gem, chances are if it's on the Switch, you're gonna find out about it right here. But anyway, this has been the Budget Gamers. As always, thanks for watching.